Being boring. Where does this come from? Well, it comes from me on Wednesday night being in a hotel, and I'd had a really busy, full-on, intense couple of days, and I was sitting in my hotel room, and I sort of come in, did a little bit more work, got changed, had dinner downstairs in the hotel's restaurant, come back upstairs, put the regular TV on. I don't usually watch TV at all. Put the TV on, and then about 45 minutes as I was sitting on my hotel bed, I sort of come up in with my head, I am boring. I am bored. And it got me thinking, where did that saying bored come from? Where did the word boredom come from, and what does it mean? And in fact, is it too easy now to become bored, or is it too easy to become boring? You know, you're getting the same routine, the same rut over and over again. So I started looking at the word bored and where it sort of comes from, and there's many definitions. And the one I really enjoy, which describes the feeling of being bored, is when you make a boring hole, or you bore a hole, you basically drill a hole into a piece of wood, and you have to go slowly and slowly and slowly and slowly to bore that hole so it's uniform. And I like that. If the saying came from boring and bored, being bored comes from that saying, that really sums up the feeling for me. There's also some great studies about being bored. So bored. So they did this study in America where they had men and women, and what they did was they said to them, right, what we want you to do is we want you to sit in this room by yourself with nothing around you, no stimulus whatsoever except a button that was on the desk, and you're going to sit here between 6 and 20 minutes or so. And they were told that when you press that button, it will give you a mild electric shock. Okay, so the idea was you'd sit there with yourself, by yourself, and you would press the button if you felt you were becoming bored, and it would give you a mild electric shock. Do you know how many percent of the people that pressed that button only in a 15-minute period? 25% of the women pressed the button, and unbelievably 67% of the men pressed the button. So what does that mean? What does that mean? We would rather electrocute ourselves than being bored. Isn't that interesting? You know, so rather than being bored, we'd rather provide some type of stimulus, even if it hurts us when we're being bored. And then I got thinking about, what does that mean? Well, boredom isn't really having nothing to do. Boredom is about having lots of choices, but none of them appeal to you at that moment in time. And that's a really great way of seeing boredom, because when you say I'm bored, you can think to yourself, actually, no, I have lots of different possibilities and choices, but none of them appeal to me. So perhaps to stop being bored is changing some of those possibilities. You know, if you think about also, what does it look like to be bored? Well, we talk about state, don't we? So what's the state of someone? Maybe write that in the chat when you're watching me here. What is the state of somebody who's bored? What do they look like? You know, are they sunk down with the head down like that, and head down, and their tonality changes, I'm bored, and they start to feel bored, and that restlessness and that lethargic feeling, you know, that underwhelming feeling. You know, what's your state when you're feeling bored? What are you saying to yourself? What are you thinking? You know, it's much, I would imagine, a negative feeling that you started to think, you know. And as I said to you, what does it look like when somebody is being bored? And what even triggers you down that action? What triggers you being bored? So for me, let's look at some of the ways we possibly can move out of that state of boredom. How can we change the feelings in ourselves are emotions in ourselves, which then create our emotions. And I talk a lot about the emotion and motion circle, don't I? Emotion creates emotion creates motion, emotion creates emotion, and it goes round in that round circle. So if you're in that circle of that state of feeling bored, that lack of enthusiasm and that lack of drive and that lack of energy, it keeps perpetuating that flywheel. It keeps perpetuating yourself. So what you've got to do is try and break that boredom and try and change the momentum. So, what could you do? So I've got 5, as I usually have, 5 tips on how you perhaps can break boredom or feeling bored. So let's change our language. Let's not be bored. Let's be bold. And if we can't be bold, there's many people who are watching this. I'm sure you could be brilliant. So not bored, let's be brilliant instead. Not bored, let's be bold instead. Not bored, let's be brash instead. Change your state. And by using those words, bold, brilliant, brash, it changes your state, doesn't it? It changes that conversation in your head. So what are the 5 tips? The 5 tips for breaking boredom. Well, number 1 for me is to be aware. So when I was in my hotel room, I was sitting on the bed and I thought, I am bored. Well, I had a choice. I had a choice to do something. So you know what I did? I actually got up and did some jumping jacks. I just got out off the bed. I was in shorts, I was in t-shirt, right? And I jumped up and had a bit of a wiggle round and I felt a little bit better. I felt a bit more alive. Now, I must admit, I didn't go out my hotel room, but what I did was I sort of broke my state with a bit of physicalness. So when you break your state with using some physicalness, so if you feel bored, sit up. That was good, something went off on my computer then. If you feel bored, sit up. Take a big deep breath in. Hold that breath for 4 counts and breathe out for 4, and do that a couple of times, and that breaks your state. Even better for breaking your state, get up and go out in nature. Go out in nature. Go for a walk if you're feeling bored. It can be anywhere. You could be in a city. You could be in the country. You could be in a hotel like I was. Get up and move. Just move somewhere. And then maybe as part of step number 2, or tip number 2 here, is change it up a little. Start to notice. Notice, as you're walking around, the scenery. Notice the birds. Notice some pieces of art. Notice how something is designed. Just take a minute to stare at something and just look at its difference or whatever. Just look at something that's different, okay? If you want to, like I do when I go for a walk, I always try and take a picture on every walk I take, just to remind me of that walk. And it could be anything. It could be the beautiful fields. It could be a signpost. It could be just something funny. I saw a funny poster the other day, which I posted in the group last week. It's something that just made me smile. So number 1 is to get up and move and breathe. Just change that state. Number 1 is to get up and change that state. Number 2 was to do something different. Shake it up, take a picture, try and spot 3 things beginning with B. Make a little challenge for yourself when you are bored and get that brain going. Okay, number 2 for me is about being present and about engaging yourself into something, adding the joy to something. Maybe when you are getting that trigger to being bored, or you're being bored, flip that thinking. Why don't you just grab a book and read 5 pages of a book? Just break that boredom. Okay, so add the joy into it. Just grab a book, and it could be any book, open it in the middle and just read 5 pages to give you some inspiration. That's a really great way to get your brain back into momentum and back into emotions and get you out of that boredom state. Now, I always talk about, as tip number 3, is my journal. That journal that I have, and I was doing that this morning, very early this morning. grab your journal as tip number 3 and just write things down. Ask yourself the question, how am I feeling right now? What I'm feeling perhaps a little bit bored and I wonder why this is. Okay. It starts that process again of you breaking that momentum. So that's number 3. Number 4, which is really interesting for me, is the medical side of boredom. And in my research that I did for today, it talked about often people get bored quickly or quicker because they're overtired. They don't have the nutrition in their body. They don't have the hydration. And that inadequate rest. Basically, the body is telling you something that it's putting you into a bored state to start to shut down other things just to make sure you just take some time out. So maybe for number 4, there's 2 tips here. Number 4 is to keep that momentum up, keep the movement up, keep the hydration up, keep the nutrition up, but also number 4 is to notice. So when you're bored, notice when you are being bored, okay? Notice your triggers. So what do you do when you're bored? Well, quite often people reach for, bing, this little toy. Your phone. People reach for their phone when they're bored, and it's amazing when people check their phones, and they check their phones in all strange places, in the queues, in the bank. Some people even look at them in the cars. Other people look at them when they're on the loo. Can you imagine that, looking at your phone on the loo? I don't know who does that, but I'm told people do that. So think about the triggers. Think about the times when you are low, when your energies are low, and what you reach to as a habit, okay? So is your phone becoming a boredom habit? And if it is, what you need to do is move yourself away from that phone. So put it in a place where you have to reach to go and do it. And don't forget, that phone is designed to grab your attention. It is designed to grab your attention. It is a money-making machine, that phone. Never forget that. Everyone thinks their phone is something that's, this amazing bit of productivity. It's brilliant. Yeah, I've got one of these lovely, wonderful watches. It's still a money-making machine. And why is it a money-making machine? Is because you buy it and you buy the new one, but also you buy the apps that go along with it. And what it does is it changes your time into monetary items that someone is benefiting from somewhere. And you're thinking, oh, Steve, no, I buy my phone cheaply. I buy it in a second-hand shop, and I don't subscribe to anything, and my tariff is really low, and it's only minimal. And yeah, but what else are you putting into your phone? What else are you doing? You're using data, aren't you? You're using data, and you're putting data into it. And data, when data is sold, and I'm not saying your sensitive data, I'm just saying your habits. So every time you go to the shop and you're using your little bleep loyalty card, that's telling the shop what you buy, when you buy it, how you buy it, in what quantities, what your demographic is, etc., etc., etc. And that is really valuable data. So think about that next time you're bored. Think about who you're giving your data to. And the last tip, number 5, quickly for me, number 5 is get out and spend some time with people. People are the best relievers of bored. So pick up your phone, and I'm saying, opposite to what I said before, pick up your phone, call your mum, call your friend, call someone and say hello, or spend some time with people. You tend not to become bored when you're around people. So I hope you got those 5 points, and I hope you're a bit more aware about being bored now and how to relieve boredom. Certainly, I'm going to think about this a lot more, and I'm going to also plan not to be bored. So next time I'm in a hotel room by myself, and I've had a long day and I've eaten some rubbish hotel food, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, no, Steve, what you need to do is cut your day off at 6 o'clock, go out for a walk, a bit of a stretch, go to a restaurant you've never been to, try something new, and then you avoid that boredom, because now I know in my head there's a trigger for me being in a room by myself, being bored. It's so much easier to just go downstairs, have a hamburger or whatever you had. It was a really nice burger I had, but you know what? I could have had something different. I was in a big city that I could have had something different. And certainly don't switch on that clicker, that TV clicker. So I'm just awareness about it. So a couple of the tips for being bored. Hope you enjoy. Make sure that you put something in the chat as well. How do you avoid boredom? When do you get bored? What are your triggers? But to help you with that, some tips and techniques are: get up, get some fresh air, challenge yourself, make things different, start to notice things that you perhaps wouldn't notice, be present, add the joy to what you're doing, pick up your journal, grab a book, and spend some time with some people. And I hope that helps you stopping becoming bored. And here's another thought for you. I think it was Brendan Bouchard who said it in one of the readings, and it really got me this one: being bored only happens to boring people. There's something to think about. Being bored only happens to boring people. Over to you.